Can you give me $1? Keanu's response is shocking. It was a quiet evening in Los Angeles, and Sandra Bullock had just finished dinner at a small, cozy restaurant. She was walking down the street, lost in thought, when a frail-looking homeless man sitting on the sidewalk caught her attention. His clothes were tattered, his face weathered by years on the street, yet his eyes held a warmth that was hard to ignore. As she walked past him, he hesitantly spoke. "Miss, could you spare $1?" Sandra stopped, reaching into her purse, but before she could take out any money, a familiar voice cut through the night. "Make it 100, said Keanu Reeves, stepping out of the shadows. Sandra turned, surprised. Keanu had been dining at the same restaurant, and though they hadn't planned to meet, fate had brought them together once again. Keanu walked up to the homeless man, knelt down and smiled. "Actually, forget the 100. What do you need the money for?" The man hesitated. "Just a meal," he admitted. Keanu nodded, then stood up and looked at Sandra. Without hesitation, he said, "Let's take him to dinner." Sandra grinned. "I was thinking the same thing." The homeless man's eyes widened. "Really? You'd sit and eat with me?" Keanu put a hand on the man's shoulder. "Everyone deserves kindness, my friend." That night, the three of them sat at a diner, sharing a meal and stories. The homeless man, whose name was Robert, spoke about his life, his struggles, and how he had once been a musician before losing everything. As they finished their meal, Keanu did something even more shocking. He handed Robert a small envelope. "There's enough here to get you back on your feet. Find a place to stay, get some new clothes, and if you're serious about turning things around, meet me here in a week. I'll help you get a job." Tears welled up in Robert's eyes. "I don't know what to say, thank you." Keanu simply smiled. "Just pay it forward when you can." Sandra watched in awe. She had always admired Keanu, but this moment reminded her why he was truly one of the kindest souls in Hollywood. As they left the diner, Sandra nudged Keanu playfully. "You always do this, don't you?" He shrugged. "It's just money, but kindness, that's what really changes the world." And with that, the two actors walked off into the night, leaving behind not just a full stomach but a heart full of hope. The end. What do you think? Want me to tweak anything? Homeless man asks Sandra Bullock, "Can you give me $1?" Keanu's response is shocking. Part 2. A week had passed since that unforgettable night at the diner. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock hadn't spoken about it much, but the moment lingered in their minds. That evening, Keanu returned to the diner as promised, unsure if Robert would actually show up. Life had taught him that hope was a tricky thing. It could inspire miracles, but it could also disappoint. As he stepped inside, his eyes scanned the room. At first, he didn't see anyone familiar. He sighed, about to turn away, when a clean-shaven man in a crisp button-down shirt hesitantly approached. "Keanu?" the man asked. Keanu looked closer, his eyes widening in recognition. "Robert?" Robert smiled nervously. He looked like a completely different person. His ragged clothes were gone, his beard trimmed, and his hair neatly combed. I don't know how to thank you," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "I used part of the money you gave me to stay in a shelter. I got a haircut, bought some clothes, and I even met a guy who used to be my bandmate. He helped me land a small gig." Keanu grinned, clapping Robert on the back. "That's amazing, man!" At that moment, the diner's door swung open. Sandra Bullock walked in, looking effortlessly elegant in jeans and a leather jacket. She spotted Keanu and Robert, her face lighting up. "Hey, I figured I'd crash your little reunion," she joked. Robert chuckled. "You have no idea how much that one dinner changed my life." Sandra smiled warmly. "That was all, Keanu. I was just lucky enough to witness it." Keanu shook his head. "No, man. You changed your own life. I just gave you a push." Robert nodded, but there was still something in his expression, hesitation, uncertainty. "There's one more thing," he admitted. "I found out my daughter is still in town. I haven't seen her in years, not since I lost everything. I want to reach out, but I don't know if I should. What if she doesn't want to see me?" Keanu exchanged a glance with Sandra, who nodded subtly. "The only way you'll know is if you try," Keanu said. "People can surprise you. The way you've turned things around, she deserves to know that her father fought to be better." Robert swallowed hard. "You think so?" Sandra placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "I know so. Encouraged by their words, Robert pulled out his phone and with trembling fingers dialed a number he had been too afraid to call for years. Keanu and Sandra sat with him, waiting in silence. The phone rang once, twice. Then, "Hello?" a young woman's voice answered. Robert's eyes welled with tears. "Emily? It's me." Sandra and Keanu exchanged a small, knowing smile. Another life was about to change, and it all started with a simple question. "Can you give me $1? The end. Hope you like the continuation. Let me know if you want any tweaks or a part 3. Homeless man asks Sandra Bullock, "Can you give me $1? Keanu's response is shocking, part 3. Robert gripped the phone tightly, his heart pounding in his chest. The voice on the other end was hesitant. "Dad?" Keanu and Sandra watched as Robert's expression shifted. Shock, fear, then hope. "Emily, I know I don't deserve it, but I just wanted to hear your voice," Robert said, his voice shaking. "I've been trying to turn my life around. I should have reached out sooner, but I was ashamed. I miss you, sweetheart." There was a pause. For a moment, Robert feared she might hang up. Then she spoke. "Where are you?" Emily asked softly. Tears slipped down Robert's face. "I'm at the diner on 5th and Main." "Stay there," she said. "I'm coming." Robert let out a shaky breath as he hung up. He turned to Keanu and Sandra, eyes full of disbelief. "She's coming," he whispered. Sandra reached out and squeezed his hand. "See? You took the first step and it paid off." Keanu grinned. "Told you people can surprise you." 30 minutes later, the diner door opened again. A young woman in her early 20s stepped inside. She had Robert's eyes, but hers were guarded, uncertain. She wore a simple jacket and jeans, but there was something about her stance, strong, independent, but cautious. Robert stood up slowly. "Emily?" She swallowed hard, looking him over. "You look different." Robert chuckled nervously. "I feel different." A long silence stretched between them, the weight of lost years pressing down. Finally, Emily took a small step forward. "Mom said you disappeared, that you gave up." Robert's face fell. "I did, and that's my biggest regret." Emily hesitated, her hands clenched at her sides. "So why now? Why come back?" Robert took a deep breath. "Because I finally found hope again. Someone reminded me that it's never too late to make things right." He glanced at Keanu and Sandra, who gave him encouraging nods. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I want to be in your life again, however much you'll allow." Emily studied him for a moment. Then, to Robert's shock, she pulled out her phone. "What's your number?" she asked. Robert's breath caught. He scrambled for his phone, fumbling to type it in. Emily smirked slightly. "You still type slow." Robert laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "Some things never change." She nodded, tucking her phone away. "I can't promise anything, but maybe we can get coffee sometime." Robert's eyes shone with gratitude. "I'd love that." Emily gave him one last look before heading for the door. Just before stepping out, she turned back. "Take care of yourself, Dad," and with that, she was gone. Robert collapsed into his seat, overwhelmed. He looked at Keanu and Sandra, shaking his head in disbelief. "I don't know how to thank you two." Keanu smiled. "Just keep moving forward. That's all that matters." Sandra leaned in. "And one day, when you can, help someone else who needs it." Robert nodded. "I will, I promise." Keanu grinned, signaling the waiter. "All right, this calls for a celebration. 3 coffees, extra strong." As they laughed and talked late into the night, Robert realized something profound. A week ago, he had asked for just $1. Instead, he had been given something priceless, a second chance. The end, for real this time, or is it? Let me know if you want a part 4. Homeless man asks Sandra Bullock, "Can you give me $1? Keanu's response is shocking, part 4. Robert sipped his coffee, still processing everything that had happened. Just a week ago, he had been on the streets, hopeless and invisible. Now he had a fresh start, a chance to rebuild his life, and, most importantly, a renewed connection with his daughter. Keanu and Sandra sat across from him, both smiling warmly. "So what's next for you?" Sandra asked, stirring her coffee. Robert exhaled. "Honestly, I don't know, but for the first time in a long time, that doesn't scare me." He chuckled. "I have a roof over my head, clean clothes, and a shot at fixing things with Emily. That's more than I ever expected." Keanu leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "You said you used to be a musician, right?" Robert nodded. Yeah, I played guitar, even had a small band back in the day. But after everything fell apart, I stopped playing, Keanu smirked. Still got it in you? Robert hesitated. I don't know, it's been years. Sandra grinned. Well, there's only one way to find out. She gestured toward a small stage in the corner of the diner. It was open mic night, and a few people were already performing. A worn-out acoustic guitar rested on a stand, waiting for the next brave soul to step up. Robert's eyes widened. Oh no way, I can't just... Why not? Keanu interrupted. What have you got to lose? Robert looked between them. He felt the familiar fear creeping in, the fear of failing, of being seen, of not being good enough. But then he remembered Emily's voice. Take care of yourself, Dad. Maybe this was part of that. With a deep breath, he stood up. All right, but if I embarrass myself, you two owe me another coffee. Keanu and Sandra cheered as he made his way to the stage. The room quieted as he picked up the guitar, adjusting it in his hands. The weight felt familiar, comforting. He strummed a few chords, testing the strings. Then, closing his eyes, he began to play. At first, it was just the music, a slow, soulful melody that filled the diner. Then he started to sing. His voice was raw, a little rusty, but filled with emotion. It was a song he had written long ago, back when he still believed in himself. As he played, something shifted in the air. Conversations stopped. People turned in their seats, drawn in by the music. Even the staff paused to listen. Keanu and Sandra exchanged a glance, smiling. When the last note faded, the diner erupted into applause. Robert sat there for a moment, stunned. He hadn't felt this kind of warmth, this kind of acceptance in years. As he stepped off the stage, a man approached him. That was incredible, the man said. I run a small club downtown. We do live performances every weekend. If you're looking to get back into music, we could use someone like you. Robert blinked. Are you serious? The man nodded, handing him a business card. Think about it. Robert turned to Keanu and Sandra, holding up the card like it was a golden ticket. Did that just happen? He whispered. Keanu grinned. Told you people can surprise you. Sandra raised her coffee cup to second chances. Robert smiled, lifting his cup in return. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving, he was living. The end? Or maybe a new beginning. Want a part 5? Maybe Emily shows up to one of his performances? Homeless man asks Sandra Bullock, can you give me $1? Keanu's response is shocking. Part 5. 1 week later, Robert found himself pacing nervously backstage at the Blue Note, the small club where he had been invited to perform. The dim lights, the soft hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, it all felt surreal. Just days ago, he had been sleeping on the streets. Now he was about to perform for a real audience. Breathe, man, Keanu said, clapping him on the back. You've got this. Sandra, sipping a cocktail nearby, smirked. You survived open mic night at a diner. This should be easy. Robert let out a shaky laugh. Easy? I haven't played on stage in over a decade. Keanu leaned in. Then it's about time you start again. The club's manager peeked in. You're up next, Robert. Robert nodded, took a deep breath and grabbed his guitar. As he stepped onto the stage, the crowd quieted. The spotlight felt heavy, but then he saw her. Emily. She was sitting near the back, arms crossed, an unreadable expression on her face. She had actually come. His throat tightened, but then he heard Keanu's voice in his head. What have you got to lose? So he started playing. The first few chords filled the room, soft and nostalgic. He had written this song years ago, back when he still had dreams before life had knocked him down. But tonight, it wasn't just a song. It was a message, a promise. His voice was raw, filled with everything he had been too afraid to say. I lost my way, I lost my light, but I've been fighting every night. If I could turn back time, I'd hold you close and never let you go. The room was silent, hanging on to every word. As he sang the final note, Robert hesitated, then looked directly at Emily. She wiped her eyes. Applause erupted, but Robert didn't hear it. He could only see his daughter standing up, walking toward the stage. He set his guitar down just as she reached him. That song, was it for me? She asked softly. Robert nodded. Every word. Emily stared at him for a long moment. Then, to his shock, she stepped forward and hugged him. I've missed you, Dad. Robert's breath caught. He held her tight, afraid to let go. I've missed you too, sweetheart. The crowd cheered again, but this time it wasn't just for the music. Keanu and Sandra clapped the loudest. Sandra nudged Keanu. "You think we just witnessed a movie-worthy moment?" Keanu smirked. "Nah, this is better than a movie. This is real." And for Robert it was more than real. It was the beginning of a life he never thought he'd have again. The end, or maybe just the start of something beautiful. What do you think? Want a part 6 where Robert gets a record deal?